Hey everyone, today I want to just show you another example of surface design on a fat quarter. When I'm doing these surface design exercises I use the same principles over and over again, and some of you might get a little bit bored hearing about them, but I hope not, because seeing them in different examples might help build some of your confidence in using some paint. So I've got a fat quarter here. It's a apricot colour hand dye. It's actually a cotton sateen, 100% cotton, but it's woven in a way that gives the top surface a shiny finish. So one side is quite matte and the other side is quite shiny. I gave it a quick eye, but it didn't seem to do much. And ultimately what I want to finish with is a focal point that is a couple of butterflies. So I'm going to create some texture in the background, and then I'm going to have 3 little butterflies in quite a solid, strong colour flying across my piece. So as usual, when I'm selecting textures, I want a lot of contrast in my textures. So today I've got the circles, the I don't know, glass stains or wine stains or something, a bit of a favourite of mine at the moment. I have some snake or lizard skin that has a couple of different textures and sizes of aperture, and I have the crackle, another one that I've been using quite a lot lately. And you can see that these give really different types of shape. So the wine stains are quite large, quite open, and obviously quite circular. This one is a medium-sized print, my crackle. So I have medium-size apertures so that medium-sized amount of paint comes through. And this one is quite detailed. Now, in reality, along here, you'll get a lot more paint on the surface than any of these others, but this gives the impression of being a smaller, more compact pattern. So when I layer these 3 up, I'm going to get quite a lot of contrast built into the patterning on the background. And I'm going to use 3 colours. So I'm going to use, in the Lumiere paint, the brass, the pearlescent magenta, and grape. So getting a bit low on brass, but I'll have enough for today. And I'm going to work darkest to lightest. I don't always do that. Sometimes I alternate that. Sometimes I'll go light first and then dark. And that sort of has the impression of light coming through the background of the patterning. Excuse me. But in this case, I want to actually have the light hitting from the front, like you would if you were standing in front looking out into the light. Now, sometimes it doesn't matter how you change those things up, and sometimes it does. So I've got here my usual very expensive palettes. So just takeaway containers that have been washed and reused. And I'm just going to put a small amount of the paint into the bowl. I'll start with the bowl, and I might move up across to the lids depending on how I go. Now I might need a bit more paint, but we'll make that decision as we go. I always put a very small amount of paint out first, and then, because you just never know if you're going to need more or less. And then dive in. I've already made a mess on my fabric, but that won't matter because I will cover it. So I'm just painting through the gaps. I'm going to have to replace this brush, so excuse me for a minute because that brush is hopeless. I use these foam brushes because they're basically disposable, and that one is now ready to go, definitely ready to be disposed of. So I've got paint everywhere. One of the things you have to be very careful of when you're using stencils is to make sure that there's no paint underneath the stencil, because that's what transfers. So always work with a bit of paper towel underneath and just give it a wipe down from time to time as you're moving around. You can see here I've transferred paint that I didn't want to. But again, I will cover that and it'll all be good in the end. Right, so let's get stuck into getting some paint on some fabric. So I'm just going to do a few bits and pieces with the purple and the circles, and then I'm going to change to a different stencil with the purple. So one of the things that's great about Lumiere is it does dry quite quickly, so as I'm working, because I'm only putting a very light coating of paint on any given part of any of this, it will be dry by the time I get to the next bit, which is of course fabulous. So I'm just creating this sense of circles all over the place. And just trying to keep a little tidy as I work. And then I'm going to change the stencil. Now Lumiere paints, because they're a full body paint, they sit where you put them, so you can use them for stencils, stamps, screen prints, all sorts of things. So while I've got some purple still, I'm just going to do a small amount of snake skin. And I'm just filling background, not necessarily really thinking about it at this stage. I just want to create a little bit of texture. And you can see that if you have little messes like I did with the stencil, it's very easy to fix simply by putting something else over the top. I'm going to stop now, I think, with purple, maybe one little bit more over here. Now I'm running the risk of becoming too symmetrical here. See how symmetrical that's become? And I don't want to do that. Too much structure doesn't work for me. I like it to be a little bit more unstructured. Okay, so I'm done with purple for now. I may come back to it, but I probably won't. I'm going to move to the pink. Oops. Possibly more pink than I had planned on. So I'm just going to squeeze out a little bit of paint from my purple brush. I didn't leave a lot on there because I put most of it onto the fabric. You just want to make sure that you keep everything nice. And now I'm going to go through with the pink and just add a bit more of the various textures. You can see automatically that changing from the circles to the snake skin and adding some pink has changed the dimension of this piece of fabric. Already I'm starting to see some movement, which is great. So I'll just keep working our way around, filling some of the spaces. Now, you really don't need to put a lot of planning into this sort of thing. Just go a little bit with the flow and make sure that as you're working, you just keep reassessing where you're at and where it needs a little bit more structure. A couple more pink bits. One more. No, I'm going to change now and go back to my snake skin. And just build some in. just always work in decreasing amounts. So whatever you do first, you want to make your first layer the most, and then you come in and increment and do a little bit less and a little bit less as you build up your layers. Alright, that's starting to look quite interesting. I'm going to swap to the gold now. Might need to go and get another piece of paper towel. I always think I'm prepared when I start filming, and then I find 5 things that I should have brought with me that I didn't. Anywho, so with the gold, I'm going to just, oops, haven't got a lot of that left. Oops, that's probably more than I need as well. See how we go. Gold, I'm going to do a little bit more of the circles, and then I'm going to go over and do some crackle, and then I'm going to come back in with some pink. Now the gold really comes into its own once it's dry. While the metallic paints are wet, they look lovely, but it's when they really start to shine with the dry paint that you get the real magic starting to happen. So I'm just going to fill gaps in, put a bit of colour where I feel like it needs it, overlapping some of the existing elements, filling up some holes. Now this gold's got a little bit of purple coming through as well from the original paint, but I don't mind that. So one of the best parts about paint is you can blend it, so it doesn't really matter. I don't necessarily want repeatable results when I'm doing a piece like this. I want it to be a one-off. I want it to not be like any other piece. I like things to be original. As I said, I will go back through and put a little bit of pink. Just tiny, oh maybe I won't, maybe I'll just stick to the gold. Make the decision when I get there. So, stop with circles for now. And I'm going to come in with some crackle. And I'm basically going to put the crackle where there's gaps. So, just using the same elements. You don't have to, but I would never ever ever use a whole square of a stencil because it just looks too formed up and structured. I only ever use little bits of it at a time. And whatever that bit is changes depending on my mood, and sometimes I don't even think about it, to be quite frank. So I'm just going to put a little bit more of that gold because I want more gold in that space. You can see how the apricot is transforming now as a background. It's contrasting the purple, but it's complementing the pink and the gold, which is quite lovely. So, head on over here, at the top. Just managed to get paint on my thumb. That's okay, I'm fairly regularly covered in paint. Now, although I've used all sorts of different bits, nothing really dominates. So you can start to see that the whole piece is coming together. The purple is the loudest, obviously, and it's really jumping out at the moment because it's a light coloured base and all the other elements around it are light coloured. Which is why I'm going to go over again in with a bit more pink and just tie some more of that in. I reckon that's probably as much gold as I need. I'll just use the last little bit up. brush it till the brush comes clean, basically. Right, so I think that's starting to look pretty cool. But I will, as I said, just go through with a tiny bit more pink, not a lot, just a little bit of pink. And I'm going to do a little bit of the snake skin, but mostly I'm going to do crackle. This one's coming across as really soft and drifty, which is really interesting and nice. I like that. I'll just swap over now. Get some more body, so slightly stronger. And I'm mainly going to focus on where there's a lot of purple with the pink, just to tone it down a little bit. Not a lot, I still want the purple to come through and be super strong, but I want to bring it down just a little bit. And you can keep doing this over and over and over again as you work your way through your piece. Fill your gaps. And you get this really wonderful, unique fabric that you can use in all sorts of different techniques. There's not a project that you can't use painted fabric in. Alright, I think I'm going to mostly call that quits. Mainly because I don't want to get more paint out, but anyway. But I think we've got pretty good coverage there. So I've got a really active, quite gorgeous piece. Now I'm going to give this a couple of minutes to dry because I don't want to put my butterfly on until it's a little bit dry. And I might actually just do one butterfly, not three. But we'll see how we go. So with that as it is, I can simply let that dry. I can give it an iron if I want, or I can just leave it alone. And the paint will cure and set. Fabric paint has a binding agent that locks it into the fabric, so once it's fully dried out and completely cured, then it is going to be permanent on the fabric. Now, you will be able to feel that it's on there when you rub the areas that are more concentrated, the bigger areas, but it won't significantly change the drape or the hand of the fabric, which is fantastic. So I can sew this up and use it for different things. I can stitch into it. It's washable, so I can put it into a quilt, I can put it into bags, I can wear it as a garment. I'm actually thinking this might make a fabulous teddy bear. I'm on a bit of a teddy bear stage at the moment, but if I might go back to my dragonflies, but if I put a butterfly or a dragonfly on there, then it's going to be a completely different piece, more of a focal fabric. As it is now, I can use it for anything. Once I start creating elements that are feature elements, I'm more inclined to use it as a focal fabric, as a feature itself. But like any piece of patchwork fabric, you can still cut it up, even if it's got painted elements on it. So I've got my dragonflies here. One of the reasons I like them is I've got 3 different sizes, so I might actually do the dragonflies. Because although I like the butterfly, it's a single size. Anyway, let's let that dry for a couple of minutes and I'll be right back. Rightio. So I've given this a little bit of time, probably not as much as... No, it's all dry. It's pretty dry. Didn't take long. That is both the benefit and the curse of Lumiere paints. They do not take long to dry at all. So I'm not cleaning anything up or changing brushes, so I'm just going to swap over. And now I'm going to go with the Pewter Lumiere paint. Now I have decided I am going to do the dragonflies because they are my favourite. You may notice over the years I put dragonflies in pretty much everything. One way or the other, there will be a dragonfly. I'm going to start with a little one up here. So, I just want to have the look of them flying off into the distance. I'm only going to do 3, so I'm going to do 1 of each size. Just need to get that little detail in there. Now, I can see already, I need to go back and do just a little bit more in there. So, yep, looks pretty good. Just going to grab another piece of paper towel. Give that a bit of a clean so I don't transfer the paint everywhere. Actually, I might do 5. I'm going to do 3 little ones. Now, I said I was going to do 3 and then I said I was going to do 5. Why wouldn't I do 2 or 4 or 6? A lot of the time things in nature look a lot more balanced when they're in multiples of odd numbers. It's one of those weird things. So there are very few plants, for example, that have an even number of petals on their flowers. They're nearly all odd. There are some exceptions, but mostly plants are odd numbers in petals. So as a general rule, I put odd numbers of everything in whatever I'm working on. So I'm going to transfer now to the medium size dragonfly. He's going to take up a lot more space on my piece of fabric. And be a bit more dominant. Now I'm using pewter because it's quite solid and quite strong, but not really dominating. So one of the things I thought about doing was working with just the black, but I think I want to have the pewter because I don't want it to be quite as strong as the black. And you'll notice I'm basically changing my mind as I work here. So I'm getting insight to how tragically my brain works. But I'm pretty sure I'm going to go through and put a couple more medium-sized ones in there. But I'll do the big one down here first and then work out whether I want more medium-sized ones or whether there's enough already. So I find this sort of work always is a work in progress. I basically let it tell me what it needs most of the time. I start out with a loose plan, which you will have seen at the very beginning. I choose my colours, I choose my fabric, I choose the elements that I want to add to it. Yeah, I'm going to do a couple of big ones. Now, I'll do another big one just here in the centre. And so I start with the basic elements that I know that I want to put in, and then I adjust as I go. And sometimes it ends up looking completely different to what I thought it was going to do. And that's okay. It's all part of the creative process. I'm just holding this up at the top here because I didn't give those little dragonflies enough time to dry. So I don't want to have them smudged. Yeah, definitely needs one more down in this corner. So I think I'll go with a medium one. I'll just clean off my stencil a little bit first. Just to make sure I don't transfer paint where I don't want it at this last stage. Because that would make me very sad. And I'd have to keep painting. So maybe not so sad. Alright, so I'm going to put a medium size one. Okay, so I've got, might go that way. And ideally, I don't want to have to bring more paint out of the pot. So hopefully I've got enough in the brush. Okay. And there we have it. Love that. It's subtle. It's a bit more subtle than I often work in. Well, apart from the fact that the purple really does pop. You've got really lovely, just turn it around so the camera's the right way. You've got these really lovely subtle dragonflies in the background. 7. See, if I was going to break my own rules, I'd do another small one up here in the corner. I might yet do that. But that would make 8. But I don't think anyone would notice actually, so I'm going to do that. And then I'm definitely going to stop. So I want that one to fly that way. Struggling to get the last bit of paint out of the brush. I really should just put some more into the pot. It's not like I've got a shortage of paint. But I should make it. Okay. So now I'm just going to flip that back over so you can see the full piece. And we won't talk about the fact that there's 8 dragonflies. That looks pretty good. What I'll do with it, I do not know. But I like to have pieces like this around just so I can cut them up when I feel like it. Still could see a bear. But I could equally wrap it over a canvas and frame it. It really just comes down to what you want to do. Or I could cut it into, 6-inch squares and stitch it in a quilt or something. Be a nice bag as well, but I don't need to tell you how to use fabric. You all know how to do that. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this little exercise. I hope you like the fabric that I've created. I hope you've enjoyed seeing the process and kind of scary insight into how my brain works. And I'll see you again next week.